the cloud. There we go. There we go. All right. That's all I'm doing. If whatever else happens is gonna have to be left to the angels, because I'm done with trying to sort that stuff out. We're recording. That's good enough for me. All right, so let's get back on track here. So what had happened is we had that meeting, and I went through the characteristics and principles as I see them in the previous meeting, and I thought that we would review that here a little bit here, so that we're kind of all on the same page, and see if there's any discussion about that, and then move on to kind of how we apply those and explore them a little more deeply and get into some of the specifics of them and why they're meaningful and useful and that kind of thing. And again, my real concern is that what's happening is we start conferences like this without a solid foundation from which we're all at least have some shared understanding. And it's because I think there are many reasons for this. One, we're used to things happening like the UN saying this is the definition of for sustainability, and everyone goes, okay, yes sir. But if you look at that definition, it's so wishy-washy and so vague. You could drive a 10 wide set of trucks through that thing and do anything you want, and that's what we see happening. Everything and anything is being greenwashed because that definition has no teeth to it. And so I came up with my own not long ago, actually, and that I shared last time, and I'll share it here again, so that we're all kind of on the same page. And I kept running to people who thought that things that I know factually are not sustainable are sustainable. And for example, some of the things that we most commonly think of it as sustainable, wind generators, solar generators, these days, cars, electric cars are supposed to be sustainable, and none of them are, and they're not even close to sustainable, and that is not commonly understood, and that's a problem, right? So it's not a matter of them not being perfect. It's a matter of people's thinking they're perfect, so that as we move forward and we're planning and designing a future society together, if we're planning a regenerative society and it's built around cars, it's an immediate fail. It's already failed. If we do that, if we follow that pathway, we will end up in failure, because you simply can't do that, at least not with the technology we have now. In order to do that, you would literally have to be able to leave Earth and get all the materials we need for building things from off planet, bring them back, and then also have the ability to take all the trash off planet. If you could do that and never touch the Earth, then you can have electric cars forever, or until the sun eats us. But otherwise, you can't. And so this is a really serious issue, that what the conversation we're having around regenerative systems is not based in the facts of what is regenerative, what is not, what is sustainable, what is not. And thus we're creating systems and taking time to do things that we may not have time for, right? And so we have these big issues. So let me share with you the definition, and then I'll pause for a minute and see if anyone has anything to say about what I've said so far, and hopefully none of those comments will be about how badly I started this room, this meeting. Uh, I'm a little bit silly, but anyway. So there's the definition. I put it in the chat. So the use of the ecosystem and ecosystem services in such a way as to allow a community or society to operate indefinitely resilient to external shocks or changes or shocks without eroding the resource space. In other words, not consuming resources, or ecosystem functions, not damaging the ecosystem, and to enhance the productivity and natural functioning of the ecosystem. So, I mean, that's a very different thing from, hey, let's just be careful about what we're using. which has no teeth, has no definitions, have no structures, has no limits in it. And so I think this is much more useful because it causes us to stop and think, is what we're doing, abridging or going against any of this definition? So yeah, you don't have to let me know. Yeah, go for it. Anybody, comments, thoughts, critiques, criticisms, songs you want to sing, whatever.
Grace, do you want to go first? And okay, I'm pulling up a definition for my comment. But when I think about this lately, last year or so, I've really just become really pissed off with the word resilient and resilience. And then I got the gift of, just kind of exploring, learning more about nature and processes in nature, and came across this concept of anti-fragility. And so, I really love the definition, and I'm also excited about applying anti-fragility and what that is, or leaving that into this definition. Is anybody deep? I saw the spirit hands, Grace. Are you familiar with anti-fragility? Did you want to say something about it?
Not specifically, but yeah, of course it makes sense. Nature is anti-fragile. You're anti-fragile. I guess what you would say is the most obvious one is, if I get a disease, not only do I get better all by myself, but I am no longer susceptible to getting that disease in the future. It's more than resilience. It's actually, I build myself stronger each time I overcome an adversity, and that's how nature is designed.
I think those are good notes, and that is, I hope, somewhat inherent in the definition as it stands. But I have no problem with figuring out how to reword this to actually have that phrase in there. And I think it was Nicholas Nassim Taleb that came up with that term.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it is a beautiful term because it just is so clear about what you're talking about.
Yeah. My comment is in a different area, and that's this thing that you've written here of productivity. Productivity is such and ecosystem services. What the hell is that? There's some implication when you say something is an ecosystem service that this ecosystem is here to serve something. And as far as I know, nature isn't here to serve something. And it's certainly not here to serve me as a human being. And productivity is something that we as human beings maybe think of something as productive, but it's just it doesn't respect what an ecosystem is. I don't think of it when I donate blood, that's not an ecosystem service that my body is giving. And, and I'm not maintaining my body in order to give more of this blood donation, which is an ecosystem service that I can give. And I'm giving an extreme example because it's obvious, right? And it's the same thing maybe with a cow or a sheep, right? It's they're not alive in order to give you milk or wool. And so it's a very human-centric productivity thing. The other thing about the productivity thing is we have a really distorted, even as human beings, even if we were the center of the universe, a distorted picture of what productivity is. And if you just think about the things that we pay for and the things we don't pay for, there's some types of work that are never get paid for, like being a mom or something or whatever, care work, and that's not paid for, whereas certain kinds of extractive work is paid for. The whole concept of productivity is very strange to me.
No, I actually agree with you. So I like your comments. So I think there's a very simple fix to this actually. If we change it from indefinitely resilient to external shock without eroding resource base or ecosystem functions, and to enhance the productivity, we'll leave that one aside for just half second. And I want to go to and the
I do have a suggestion if it's helpful.
Yeah, go for
To
it.
me, what we're looking to do is maximize aliveness.
Um, Can I maybe say something as well?
Go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks. And I want to apologize to everyone before because I'm super interested in this conversation. I'm having to go kind of back and forth because I have family here. So I stated that in there, but it's very important for me also because I am having a lot of confusion in the sphere that I'm in. I took the regenerative practitioner course with Regenesis Institute last year. It's been an incredible transformational course for me. And I also work with Regen B, Regenerative Built Environment Institute. And we're looking at evaluating not, I wouldn't say destination projects so that we can design them according to a regenerative perspective. And essentially from what, I don't want to say what little I've been able to grasp yet because it's a lot, but at the same time, I consider myself to be very, very, very far from knowing what the reality of things are, just a very early stage in a journey of learning about regeneration practices of the self and of others and of nature in general and whole living systems. But really just looking, for me, it's really at looking at how I can expand the potential of when I'm looking at a place and its people. So when we're looking at it, when I'm looking at it from a real estate perspective or from a project perspective, it's looking at everything, you know, the natural system, the society, the communities. And so I did see alignment in certain things that Killian wrote on there, but I also agree with you, Grace, as well, that there are some words that are doing it a disservice. I don't know if that makes sense to all of it, but I wanted to state that.
Yeah, so I'm editing as you guys are speaking to me or speaking to us, and I'm realizing that the first term that was addressed is probably just redundant and can just be taken out, and thus actually add clarity by removal. And then the second one is to turn it into a noun, natural functioning. And now we got to deal with productivity. Enhance the what do we say in permaculture? We don't talk about productivity, we talk about abundance. There we go. How about abundance? So let me add abundance in here and replace that other word and see what you guys think about it in its edited form. There we go.
If you're editing a document, do you mind sharing the link again? I joined late and I don't have it.
I'm sorry, what was that?
If you're editing a document among all of you, do you mind sharing the link again?
I don't have a document. Well, I do, but it's like really
It
old and nasty.
isn't a link. If you go to the place where you went in order to click on the Zoom room, on that same web page, there's a thing that is called I'm sorry, I have to move my things around. Harvest doc.
I see it. Okay.
We're editing in the harvest doc. That would be great if you would help out with that.
Oh, I didn't really, I misunderstood what you're asking me actually. So you're looking for the place to make notes and such. Okay. So
yeah, just whatever you're looking at. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. So what do you guys think about the edited version that is now partially your version?
I love abundance in this context, I have to say. But I'm cautious about that word because it gets associated, like the idea that it gets associated with having more and more, with accumulation.
It does, but
that's why I kind of
right. But in the permaculture context, it doesn't have any of that connotation. So I get a little bit tired of retreating from words because people are going to co-opt it. We know they are. I think we have to get much better at standing our ground and saying, sorry, you can't have that. You're a liar. You're an idiot. Sorry, you don't get to do that. So I think for now, that's within that context of the permaculture way of thinking and the ecosystem functioning. Right now, I'm okay with it. So if you're okay, I'll leave it there for the moment. Mostly actually so we can move on to other stuff because we only have 2 hours. at least on the clock, and we've used like 42 of them already, 42 minutes. Although time limiting is not something I want to do, so we can stay on this if we need to. And I do see Francis' hand. Francis, did you have something you want to say?
No, I just did a few minutes ago. I think I might have jumped into a different definition beforehand. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Right. So is everyone okay with this enough that we can move on? And this can always be revisited. If I'm suspecting that at least I will think that we need a session 3 on this. And we can always revisit it. But if you have anything, if you feel like we need to stay on this for a minute, we can. So tell me what you want to do.
Just one more thing. And this is just about like what I'm hearing from you, Killian, and from others is just like this relational kind of language wanting to make it happen. And I think that a really easy way to do that is to start off with the word relationship. So instead of use a relationship with the ecosystem as a proposal that I would make as in place of the use of.
A relationship with. Okay, I kind of like that. Actually.
Relationship with or relationship in or whatever, but relationship seems to be more the heart of a lot of what we've shared.
Let me type that in and see how that rolls in terms of the English. A relationship with the ecosystem, our ecosystem. Let's make it personal. Our ecosystem in such a way, such that, we have to change that to be grammatically correct, such that, oh, you're making me change all the grammar. What are you doing to me?
You don't have to change it. We can move on to the next thing. You know,
no,
we don't have to do this.
I actually really
it's just a point.
No, I'm just teasing you because I'm a language teacher. And so I'm teasing you about that, making me get into, this is my time off. I don't want to do language right now. But I'm just joking. No, I love this, actually. I love that you did this. A relationship with our ecosystem. So as, I got to get the verbs and everything matching up. So as to allow a community or society to operate indefinitely, resilient to external changes and shocks without eroding. Blah, blah. You guys have done a great job. Wow, this is amazing. I thought I was really happy with that definition, and you guys blew it out. You blew it out of the park. Beautiful. All right, good work. Nice. Thank you so much. All right, so from there we move on to the characteristics that it's kind of, I got to figure out a faster way to do all this review stuff so these sessions don't go on forever. But the characteristics, let's see. So the characteristics of a regenerative society or community or system, to me, came from observing how indigenous societies function. Okay, that's exactly where they came from. No fuss, no muss. It didn't come out of my head. It's not anything that I'm brilliant about. It's not anything that anybody else is brilliant about. It came from observing how these systems function. Period. Done. And so they are basically the following. One, in these, let me back up a little bit, because the reason I say that is the only systems on this planet that seem to be not only preserving biodiversity and functioning of the ecosystem, but actually enhancing it are intact indigenous societies. That's it. It doesn't happen anywhere else. There aren't even, as far as I know, any eco-villages, quote unquote, or anything like that, that is actually to the point of true regenerativeness. It's a very high bar to hit, but these places do. And so it made sense to me to look at how do they function? What are they doing? Much like Bill Mollison, 60, 70 years ago, was wondering why our dams and stuff, created such problems when we built them. Yet when a beaver or beavers build a dam, it creates like an oasis. It creates this beautiful functioning thing that actually increases biodiversity, increases the water availability. It just creates rather than detracts from. Our dams destroy. And that really bothered him, and he started thinking about this, and that's what led him to a lot of the later stuff that came. And so the question is, what in the hell are we doing wrong? We think we're so smart. What are we doing wrong? And so for me, I personally said, okay, I want to understand this. And so I started looking at what are they doing that we don't do. And so the answers are pretty simple, actually. One is they are commons based, right? And they are basically nested commons. So you end up with basically anything that's really important or that you would consider a real resource, a natural resource, what have you, is basically shared. And this is pretty consistent. It's probably not absolute, and it depends on what time frame you're looking at. If you're looking at like the Maya, no, they weren't probably regenerative. They might have been close, but they probably weren't. So you have to look back to the eras before monumental building and that kind of thing. Probably the mound cultures might be okay, but anything other than that probably is getting into something that is unsustainable eventually. It's hard to assess. It's hard to know exactly. So some of those might squeak in, but I prefer not to play that game and just look at what I'm certain or what I think we can be certain is regenerative. And so they're commons based, and yet they have they're egalitarian of some form. There are many forms, and there are some really interesting forms out there. Some that are more patriarchal, some more matriarchal, but very flat, and so that there's very little hierarchy to it, and no real hierarchy at the end of the day. That's what I'm looking for. When they get into hierarchies, I'm not interested in those because I don't trust those to stay regenerative. I think they're too easy to corrupt. And so personally, I kind of like that's where I draw my limit. 3, even though so they're commons based, egalitarian, needs based. Everything is needs based, right? You only take what you need from the ecosystem, and the corollary to that is you consume within the boundaries of the ecosystem, meaning within the productivity, within the ability of the ecosystem to function, within ecosystem functions. Let's put it that way. They are, even though they're egalitarian, right? So they're very egalitarian, and they're meaning they are highly cooperative, right? And yet they tend to have literally absolute individual autonomy. That's the trick. We don't get anything even close to being able to do that. Right. So how in the world do you cooperate?
What do you mean? What do
closely?
you mean by that?
And let me give you a great example. There's an anthropologist, one of those that I've read, shared this example that they were observing this community, and one day, and this one gentleman turned to his son, seemed to be mid-teens kind of age maybe, and said, "Hey, go get me some water." And everybody else sitting around said, "What? Whoa, look at the king. Look how special you are. Oh my goodness." And basically they're letting him know, you don't get to tell anyone else what to do. You don't get to tell anyone else what to do. What in the world are you doing? So even his own son, he couldn't order around. Right? Whereas we do that. We're like, "Hey, go take out the trash." They don't do that. They don't tell each other what to do.
I
So
feel
it's
like that's
really,
very idealized. Like, I don't think that that's going to be unanimous, and I feel the same way. Like, I don't. I don't think that's going to be unanimous in any culture. And I also think that that's an example, but generally speaking, there are cultural norms in every tribe. I
Right,
mean,
but
if you look
what?
at the markings they have on their face, for example, in some tribes, they don't have autonomy not to put the markings on themselves. They have to tattoo their body if they're a part of that tribe. So I think that this is kind of like some kind of idealistic, utopian dream of what the primitive people are doing, not, or indigenous people are doing, not the truth.
Unfortunately,
They have rules about who you can marry and who you can't marry, just like every other culture in the world. It's very hard for me to believe that there's any society that holds together as a society without rules.
no, well, but social norms are not laws, right? That's a different thing, right? And being able to tell someone what to do is different from norms that have been developed over thousands of years, perhaps, that have become how the society functions and how it stays together. Those
I'm
are
just,
really different things. So on the day-to-day kind of basis, if you want to help build a hut, then you do. If you don't want to help build a hut, you don't. If you want to go fishing, then you do. If you don't want to go fishing, you don't. But that's a little bit different thing from, are there social norms? Of course there are, but
I
you have the
think,
autonomy in
I,
yourself within those norms to do what you wish.
I suspect that we really don't know. I mean, I was reading, Charles Eisenstein gives an example of a tribe that he was visiting, that they were deciding whether to slit somebody's throat or not because the guy didn't share his food and he was the best hunter in the tribe and he decided to hoard. So I suspect that the absolute individual autonomy isn't absolute, and that it's it belongs to some indigenous peoples and not other indigenous peoples. And the same for hierarchy. Elders are a kind of hierarchy. I think this is an idealized view.
Right. You keep saying that, and I'm encouraging you to stop saying that, because it's not. It's based in scholarship and knowledge and stuff. So saying it's idealized basically is telling me I'm not thinking, which
It's telling
is
you
kind
that I
of
can't believe that every indigenous people on Earth is the same as every other indigenous people on Earth. I just can't believe that. That sounds weird to me.
right. So Grace, I didn't say that though. So that's a straw man argument, right? So that's something I didn't say that you're claiming, but I didn't say it. So I just want to be
Okay.
clear about that. And so what I did say is that these are common to most tribal people that are intact, right? And it's not an absolute, you're right. And that there are tribal norms, of course there are, sure. And that each tribe develops its own culture, sure, absolutely. And sure, over time, people become acculturated, absolutely. But within that, again, there's nothing. Here's another example. There was a tribe that Helga Vierich, Professor Helga Vierich, was observing, and she wondered why the women didn't go hunting, because she assumed they couldn't go hunting, because that's what we would, in the West, we'd be like, hey, men hunt, women don't, kind of thing, right? And so she asked them, so doesn't it bother you guys that you don't get to go hunting? And she's like, and the women are like, what do you mean don't get to go hunting? So they go hunting and they spend 3 or 4 days out in the bush. They're hungry. They can't light a fire because they might scare off the animals. They can't talk because they might scare off the animals. And if they won't get to eat really until they catch something. Whereas we get to sit here and chat all day if we want to, and work together in a group, and we can do the little local hunting, the smaller scale hunting, and we can work in the garden, and we take care of the kids, blah blah, and we have food. And we can talk and chat all we want. So what she realized was this was a kind of a gender differential thing, but it wasn't imposed. It wasn't a law. It was that the women are like, I don't want to go hunting. I can go hunting, I don't wanna, kind of thing. And so this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. We're not saying that you have the absolute right to do anything. It's not chaos, right? It's not anarchy. And so, yeah, if you are harming the community by hoarding or hurting someone or something like that, then certainly the community, like all communities, will do something about it. But there's a huge difference in how that is often done in such communities versus how we would do it, right? It tends to be really gentle at first, and it scales very carefully, and because they don't want to kick anyone out, but they will expel you if you get bad enough. If you're uncooperative enough, you will be expelled or shunned or something like that. So it is not in fact this idealized thing. It's just that I can't take time in this space to tell you every facet of all of this. Just to share, to say to you that when it comes to like your daily decisions about work you're going to do or not do or that kind of thing, and you have the freedom to work or not work, to be part of a work detail of some kind or not, always. That's the difference. And no other adult in the space has a right to tell you to do or not do something along those lines. Now, whether you choose to follow cultural norms within that, that's a kind of a little bit different level of thing. But in terms of your daily behavior, et cetera, and your choices, yeah, nobody gets to tell you what to do. And even in the case of, like, say that like you're married and you and you're treating your wife badly, it's not a case necessarily where they would tell you you must get divorced. It would just be the case of, like, maybe the woman says, okay, we're done, and they go to the tribal group or whatever and talk about it, and they say, okay, blah blah blah. And if they can't agree, then yeah, it might be okay, fine, you're done. But the woman doesn't have to stay with this asshole, kind of thing. She doesn't have to do that. She can leave the relationship, etc., if he's not providing, not taking care of them. So she has her freedom. He has his freedom to be an idiot, but she has the freedom to say bye-bye without, and no one can say anything about it. And no one can tell him to stop being an idiot. They can just encourage him to do so, unless it becomes, again, if it's so disruptive, they would find ways to deal with it. And they do have structures, ways to manage behavior and encourage behavioral change, etc. So no, it's not, there is no idea of this utopia. Is not utopian in any way, shape, or form. But it's hard to make that really clear in such a short period of time. But I can share with you the name Helga Ingeborg Vierich, who is a Facebook friend of mine, and we've talked a lot about these things. And she did field work in Africa directly with a number of tribes and stuff. And that's one source where you can see where some of this thinking is coming from and where the observations come from. So let's the hierarchy or the most yeah. So yeah, I understand what you're saying about the hierarchy thing, but what we're talking about is not that there's not any influence by anybody. But the difference is, for example, in one of these societies, in some of these societies, most of them, as far as I can tell, would be that there is no, that our concept of what a chief is doesn't exist in most of these places. It's not, there's not a person, a man or a woman that runs around telling everyone what to do and making decrees that everyone must follow. What you do have is someone that is trusted by the society, by that community, that is respected by that community by dint of their actions over time, not because of their connections, not because of their wealth or anything else. It's tied completely to how do they behave over time, and are they so they become trusted. And that's why they're given a position of authority. But again, that position of authority is not one of telling people what to do. They're like the wise person in the space. They're the most responsible person in the community. And so they're the one who takes care of the grain stores and make sure the grain stores are taken care of and protected and stuff. That's a responsibility, though. That is not theirs. That grain silo does not belong to them. They're responsible for it, is how the right way to think about it. And that's, again, she had made it an assumption that was his, and she really wanted to roast him about it, but as an anthropologist she couldn't do that. And I think, Elif, as a sociologist, you kind of understand this non-interference thing pretty well, probably. And so she couldn't interfere. So she had to ask her questions in a way to not interfere and not cause trouble. And so she realized, and anyway, she had a conversation with him and found out that he's like, oh my God, this is such a big responsibility. It's not mine. But whew, now we have enough grain for the next 8 years. Such a relief. And it was in no sense a thing of ownership or anything. It was a sense of responsibility to the community that they asked him to take on. And I'm sure within him there is some sense of prestige and stuff, you know, a little bit of ego involved in wanting to be in that position, but it's just not the same as what we do, just not at all. And that's the important part is, and if he starts acting up, they have the, you know, the boom, you're done. Bye. You're not, you got a big head, big ego, you're done. Bye-bye. So in the best senses of utopian, it kind of is that way. In the worst senses of utopian, it's not. That's what I found anyway. So, but that's something I guess we've kind of spent more time than I wanted to on this one point. But you know, we got to do what we got to do. So I don't want to time limit the discussion. So Grace, thanks actually for your questions. It's a good question to ask, good points to make. But
Yeah, I'm going to leave the
are,
discussion because I obviously don't have the right background to give appropriate input. I just haven't done the research that you've done into these indigenous communities, and so obviously I can't really contribute to the conversation. But I
well, no,
appreciate it.
your questions are contributing, but this isn't the main point of this room anyway. This is just a small piece of it that we just got off on a bit of a discussion
I know,
about.
but it sounds like you have a very clear structure that you want to propose, and I just don't feel that it's late at night. Like I think that you have a very clear structure for this, and that I just don't have the right background to really be productive. I feel like I'm taking it off track.
No, you're not, but okay. If you want to go, of course, you know, you need to. But
Yeah, thank
no,
you.
you're fine. You're fine. You're fine in the space. You're fine here. Don't worry about it. From my perspective, anyway. Alrighty. So where were we on the list?
Number 5, where did we get to?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Absolute autonomy. That's where we.
Right. So absolute autonomy. We talked about so egalitarian, commons, needs-based, consume within the ecosystem, absolute individual autonomy, networks of small communities, and that fits in with Dunbar's number and different things like that. And these communities, they tend to be a mix of, you know, like say there's 10 villages in this network. You know, you have kinship relations with probably someone in almost every part of that or whatever, but they're tight knit, but it's not all one bloodline. You know, that's not what happens. And in any one village, it's not all the same family. It's very mixed. And so they're obviously doing things to keep from getting into problems like the European kings and queens get into with too much of the same genes in one place. But the point is that it's a network. That's the key. It's a network, and it's small communities within walking distance of each other so that they have support. And the network gets into, this is where we get into decision making a little bit, also not just egalitarian, but the network is such that they make their decisions in their small groups, but then they get together every so often, maybe once a year or twice a year, or whatever, and then they do group decision making about how to manage the whole space. And I see you nodding, Uhuru. Maybe you have some knowledge about this.
Yeah, it's like you're telling the story of my people.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's really beautiful to hear academics talk about it.
Well, no, it's beautiful to have people like you have shared that knowledge with me. That's the only reason I can do that. So thank you to you and anybody else that has been able to either confirm and or give information so I can share this with others. That's the only reason I can. So thank you. So did I write that down? Yeah, networks of small communities. And there's a couple of things. Gosh, I forgot them again. they're not the most vital. The most vital ones I've gotten out. And my belief about this, about why this is possible, there are three things, but to me, the one that most applies to what we're doing is they know their ecosystem and they know their communities intimately. And so when you say, should I go cut down 10 trees just because I wanna, they automatically know that's a stupid thought because that's going to imbalance that ecosystem, right? And when they start thinking, should I be a jerk and go like take half the food and store it somewhere secret? They know not to do that because they'd be great for 6 months or a year, but their ecosystem of people would become highly destabilized and their ecosystem of people would stop functioning correctly and cause other people to have to do things in the ecosystem that would further destabilize the ecosystem. And eventually they all lose. Eventually the ecosystem isn't functioning. Eventually the entire community and network of communities is negatively affected by that one person's actions. But they know their ecosystem so well, both the human and the natural, that they simply choose not to do that. No one told them they can't. We already talked about that though. I mean, the community will, if you went down and cut down half the forest, trust me, they're going to do something. They're going to react. But no one can actually tell you not to do that. All they can do is react to you doing that because they don't have the right to tell you what to do, but they have the right to react to you doing it. So it's very different from our systems of governance and behavior management, right? So people don't do stupid stuff because they're not stupid. But we're not smart enough to be not stupid because we're so disconnected from our ecosystem, right? So we act stupidly because we simply don't know our ecosystems. We don't know it, and we can't inherently feel when we're screwing it up. And we don't have the knowledge from our mothers, our fathers, grandparents, and great grandparents, and way back eons to know what to do and not do. And they have an encyclopedic knowledge of their space in ways that we don't. Jared Diamond proposed that after his work with people in New Guinea over, I guess, a long period of time, he's like, you know what, they're smarter than we are. And I agree with that. I think that's absolutely true because they are constantly using their brains for real things, for real survival, for real problem solving. And we're using ours for just nonsense most of the time, stuff that doesn't connect to being alive tomorrow. And they're actively have to remember everything. They're not writing stuff down. It's all in their memory. They have to negotiate, relationships constantly. I think literally, if we could figure out how to measure accurately IQ between those groups and us, they would win. And I have no doubt about that. But that's just a personal opinion, and you don't have to agree with me. So here you have some sense of the characteristics and the principles. I got to figure out a way not to have to do this all again. I got to write a document. That's what. Okay, I gotta make a document for the next session. And the principles, basically, all I'm doing is drawing from the permaculture principles, which are, most of them are first principles, right? They're very basic things that get us down to the level of this is you can't get simpler than this. And so one example of that is, well, I'm just going to leave it at that because we're not moving on to applying any of this, but we got to kind of go through it to be able to apply it. Okay, so what I'm going to do then, I'm going to go to a website, and so we can run through them really quickly. One of the things that drew me to permaculture and made me stay there is that the simplicity of it is just mind-blowing. And yet it's so powerful. And that's what makes it work. So here is a page, and you can go look at it. I'll put it in the chat here. And the principles are on there. And so if we start combining these principles with the characteristics that we just talked about, for example, each element performs multiple functions. We've all heard before zero waste, right? And this is an example of that if you, for example, go hunting and you get a deer, you don't just use the deer to eat and throw away everything else. That's one function, eating, right? You use the antlers to make tools. You use the skin to make clothes or bags or something. You use the bones to make tools, or grind them up in some way, or use them for fertilizer or whatever. You use the whole thing, and that's multiple functions. It's supporting a bunch of different things within your system, and everything needs to do that in your system. If it doesn't do that, if within your system you have anything that you decide to put there that has one single function, under these principles, we would say reconsider that. Really, really reconsider that. Please don't do that, because you're probably going to screw things up somewhere down the line. And again, zero waste, that's actually one of the characteristics, no waste. But it's also a principle, zero waste. It's both. And another one,
and it is interesting, sorry for interruption, but it is
No,
interesting
please
that
do.
zero waste is also like having its own principles when you look at it. And it's very interesting that you said when we were with Daniel, you said that we should focus on recyclability. And we should develop this ability of us, instead of using like renewable energy sources or so. And I was thinking like what zero waste approach is. I mean, when I say zero waste approach, I mean like this movement started, how we can implement zero waste in our daily life, in a very, very much city life. And they came up with, generally, we can reduce it to the 5, which is common approach, is like refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then rot. So if you follow those 5 principles, you're actually able to live in a zero waste way. And then the recycling is actually on the like one of the last resort in this approach. And I think we should, I understand why you come with this approach. In a larger scale, we need this recyclable ability. But on the other hand, I think what is most important is that we need to somehow insert this idea of refusing consumption in the first place, like not like reducing the production and like and reducing the demand, and those are my priorities rather than recycle.
Right, and thus
systems.
right. No, and you see how that feeds back to number 3, right? Needs-based decision making, needs-based consumption.
And
right?
and this, I'm sorry, but I really connect that with the new actually it's very, very old life science, Ayurveda. Like we to as you said, like we don't know the ecosystem, that's why we act stupidly. And that same thing applies our very resource, which is body. Like we don't know our own bodies, which elements are dominant in your body, so you can treat your body as you should treat your body. So it's very, very much connected to me as well. And as you say, it's so simple but mind-blowing how it is interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's like use and value diversity is one of the principles, right? And when you look at these kinds of societies, they are holding currently 80% of our biodiversity, right? That's the statistic. It's probably higher than that, because we don't know a lot of what's actually in those spaces, so there's probably even more than that. But they're doing statistical modeling and stuff to come up with those numbers. But I'm guessing it's probably higher. That's probably conservative. And they're doing that because they use and value diversity, right? They seek diversity. And our systems before the modern eras were extremely diverse. They were healthier because they ate so many different things, right? Ate seasonally, but they ate a lot of different things in all these seasons, because they were eating the roots and the leaves and the trees and the bugs and the plants and the various animals, etc. They were eating everything, and we don't. Like 10 different plants dominate modern food systems. 10. And they're eating probably hundreds of different things. Thus, they were actually really healthy. And that's another misconception about indigenous communities, is when you look at the average number, there's a distortion of it because, like in childbirth is hard. I don't mean to speak for you women, but childbirth is not easy, and it's very risky. And a lot of children and women without modern medicine die in childbirth, right? So that skews the number down. A lot more children die from diseases and stuff because in their early years. And then there's accidents and diseases that we can't solve. Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you. He's gone now, but thank you for coming, Eduardo, and looking at those things. I will do so. Yeah, I'm suspected. Yeah, it's all going in the same direction. So, we have all these. We spent too much time on that one thing for today. But what I'm trying to get to is a chance to. What I want to do now, and we'll have to kind of walk through each of these points a little bit more carefully than I wanted to. What I wanted to do is go through all the characteristics and the principles and kind of flesh them out a bit, and then give you a chance to apply them and see how in everyday decision making, how can you use them, and do they make sense or not from your perspective, so you can explore that yourself. So we're going to try to do that.
Maybe if I may ask, Killian, just a quick information, just to get a sense of the basis of this information, then can you share a bit more? How did you collect it from, and have you researched who else has tried to to provide definitions and characteristics, or is it the first time that this is being done?
Apparently other people are doing it. There are people who are involved in this summit who have developed a set of principles, and I looked at them in one of the previous sessions, and because they were listed as principles, and I went through them, and several of the things in that list weren't principles by the definition of what a principle is. And so and that's not really unusual, because there's a lot of confusion about the difference between principles and values and things like that. Yeah. And it's hard for me even. I'm not claiming to be an expert in it. And so you have to think about them a little bit, about what is the function of that idea? What does it do? And principles are things that are foundational, right? They're foundational to a system of thought or to a physical system or something like that. And they can't be reduced, especially, well, there's levels of principles. So there's first principles and there's other principles. Like if I say, oh, Uhuru is such a principled woman, that's a different kind of connotation than a set of principles for a system. It means that she stands by what she believes, that kind of thing. It's a little bit different. Yeah, it is the same word. Yeah. So,
I guess where have you, gathered them from, in a sense, just to get a sense of the sources? And because I guess it's a really good contribution, and they're really interesting. I guess it's one contribution among many others, and we just need to put it into the pot and see how we collectively, bring the different views together, I guess.
Well, these are mine. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, the characteristics are mine. The principles come from permaculture.
Okay.
Yeah, and I already shared a page with you that is pretty comprehensive about those that you can see on here. And those are very physical. Those are very physical things, describing how to do systems. And that's kind of what I was going to get into with you, is that when you start designing a system, you have the characteristics of what that system should be based on existing regenerative systems, and then the principles are how to do it. They guide your building, you're actually making of things. So you think of the principles as like how engineering has principles of how you do design, how you engineer things, right? And this is I really wish we could have like a global meeting and change the name of permaculture to ecological engineering, because that's what we're doing. We're designing and engineering, right, via these principles and the process. So I hope that's enough of a little bit of a groundwork that we can do a little bit of exploration of this.
Yep.
And
okay,
so,
cool.
So let's say, for example, let's create a scenario, And it might be useful to bring up the whiteboard. Let me see if I can do this best with the whiteboard. That might be the way to go. Right, so let's say that you have, you know, a space. Let's say it's a farm, right? And I'm just trying to kind of create contours. I'm not a professional at this, folks. Don't hold this against me or anything. Those are land contours. I should have used brown. And so when it rains, water flows, and you can see it's kind of gonna come down in here maybe. This is meant to be kind of flat, but by these lines here, you can see this one kind of upsloping, a little bit downsloping, more downsloping. So water is probably going to come down and kind of like go down here, right? And so you have one of the principles is to capture and store energy, and additionally as high as possible. So you're going to want to probably put the water here, right? Maybe build a little, you know, put a little pond there maybe, or something like that. But let's say that for whatever reason, your house needs to be over here, right? The water's over here, house is over here. That's not good, right? So then, if you're capturing and storing energy, you want to at least change from max effect, all these different principles that you can look at. What might you do instead of capturing the water here? What might you instead do? And we want to capture water as high as possible. And we want it to infiltrate into the land. And we want it to go where it is, where we have the least amount of work to get to it. So what might we do? So what we can do then is spreading, if we want to store the water, right? We don't want to store it in one place, actually. We want to store it within the space. And so we have options about what to do with that. And so what we can do is start to capture it here and make it flow this way and this way, and then here and here and here and here and here and here, right? And then one of the options we have is to bring it down in this slope. And so we can, by directing the flow of the water, but not fighting it, we can create what we need to create. And, you know, it would be sad if the house is here and the water's over here, but that, you know, that could happen. And so by following the principles of least change and max effect, and the principle of capturing and storing water, and all those things, we end up with this idea of, well, let's move the water using gravity, using the earth to do so, and not fighting it, because we want the water to flow down here anyway. We want that to happen. So let's just help it happen. Let me come back to you guys a bit here. Where are you? Oh, I gotta hold on. So over here, so let's look at needs based. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so do you only have this work on like ecologic aspect of it, or do you also, like, I know the principles are quite easy to implement on the social structures as well, but I think I'm more curious about this part, because I think that's what ecologic side, it's necessary, it's eventually, like, it's the essential one, but I think we should also kind of, or excuse me if I'm talking lack of my knowledge,
go
but
ahead.
yeah, I think I wonder how we can implement those ethics, those characteristics when it comes to create the social structure or business plan, or like, because we are also talking about those terms like regenerative entrepreneurship, Yeah, but
Right.
what, like how, like what? Right now, we have like 7 pillars of our project. So that's what we are doing. Like we have a holistic school. We're building a holistic school. We have 7 focus points, and we have task groups for those activities. And I'm responsible of bringing this regenerative culture into this whole thing, actually, like from task group, from individual of this task group, to the community structure of it.
Right. And you have the challenge of doing this within the existing structures, right? And so purity is going to be difficult, right? Because
Within the existing, like I would say the only existing structure here currently, like there are 2, I guess. Are you talking about ecological side of it, or like the social side of it?
all of it. Like, for example, you live in a political system, you live in a financial
Yeah,
system,
those are, yeah, for
right?
sure, yeah.
You live in a built environment, a school, buildings, roads, all this stuff, right? Buses, trains, cars, all this stuff. And you're in a city, I assume, or a town or village?
It is going to be in the village, so, but
So it
it's
will be.
connected to the city, of course.
So what exactly are you going to do in this?
It's an eco
thing?
village. It's an
So
eco
you're-
village.
so you
It's
wanna
going to be an
create-
eco village. I am part of it. We are building an eco village in Turkey, but this eco village will have function as a school of holistic life. So while we are having permanent, like people who are permanently staying there, we will also have the mobility community who are mobile, who are just coming to give some workshops. So we will also have the people coming to benefit those workshops. So
Okay.
that's the plan, and we are doing good,
Right.
actually. Right now we are in the funding stage. We will have a opening festival, but still we are trying to figure out what is our business plan, because we will kind of generate revenue. From those activities while we are hosting other people to join. Does it make sense? I can give you more detail
It does.
another
It
time,
does,
but like that's
It
my
does.
confusion. It includes everything. It's like the whole thing, like
Right.
a representative of the life. That's what we are trying to build. But
Right.
I have a chance to make it regenerative as
Right.
much as possible.
So the challenge we have right now, just in this minute, is that you're jumping to like session 5. That you're asking questions that are session 5, because what we're trying to do is say, hey, do you agree that these principles make sense? Yeah, sure, or no. And then, oh, what about these characteristics? Yeah, okay, or no. And one person decided, no, you guys are, this is too much for me, or this is not my thing, I'm leaving. And she left because it wasn't her way of looking at things, right? And that's okay. That's expected. And maybe I'm just full of BS. Maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. That might be the end result of all this. I don't think so, but it could be. And then, and so here, what I want to try to do is give you guys a sense of how these all work together. But gosh, we use so much time that I don't know that I have the time to do it. And then finally say, hey, here's a model of how we can organize just very loosely over bioregions, and how it is reflected in all these principles and ethics and stuff, or in these characteristics and principles, and how it matches. Everything just melds just perfectly. And then but what you're talking about, you're getting into design. Design is a really different thing than what is the overall decision-making apparatus, right? Because that apparatus is fractal in this system. And so what you do in a village is the same as what you do at the city level or regional level or in the bioregion level. It's no different in the model that I propose. It's just everything is based on scale, right? But you're actually talking about design. You're talking about, basically you're asking a permaculture question rather than a regenerative governance question. And so that's the problem, is that question is a little bit premature for this talk, but it's a beautiful question. And I would love to talk with you about it. We might need to do it one-on-one, or wait and like go through a couple more sessions to get there, or at least one more session and then talk about it, because you're really asking a design question. But we can say that, for example, if you look at these, these characteristics, it is fractal. It should be fractal, right? And so, can you do it egalitarianly? You know, can you get the people in that group to say, we're going to sit together and talk about issues until we make a decision that's good for everybody? And then you have to go and do some research about the different kinds of egalitarianism, because there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them, of different ways to do something that is what you can call egalitarian, which is basically like kind of real democracy, as opposed to the fake stuff that we do in modern societies that is representative or what have you. So, but that's one of the things. So is your group willing to do that? If not, then that's something that you're going to have to deal with. Okay, you know, it's going to be hard to be truly regenerative unless we're willing to embrace this group thinking kind of thing, that we're all in this together, you know? And so, and if they all go, yeah, that sounds great, then you're golden. And then you move on to the next thing, right? So.
But that's the thing, like what I recognize in different groups. Sorry, Dominic, you were about to say something or not? Okay, that's what I recognize. Like, unless you are not bringing an example, like not like if they see the design, if you explain them, hey, it will look like this, then you skip all the academic conversations, all those, you know, like the ideal, or like if we are in the same page or not. Then they like, oh yeah, it's possible. Then let's talk about how to improve this model. And that's what I recognize. that's
can of worms.
I see them. People are like getting in the track, you know, like this is the way to kind of hunt their minds.
Yeah, the problem is your can of worms is getting bigger, not smaller, with each because you're getting to deeper levels of design issues. So where it's actually getting harder to answer your question. So it's going to take some work to unpack all that. So for now, if you don't mind, we'll try to go back to trying to explore some of these ideas of how does all this fit together.
Sure, thank you.
But I love these questions. I wish, you know, if it was just you and I, man, I'd like spend the next 6 hours talking about this. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's not the purpose of this particular session. So, wow, fun for me. All right, so let me think. I had thought of a good example and I've forgotten it, of a way we can apply this. So, what was it? It was something real specific. Oh, I totally lost. I'm gonna have to come up with something else. All right, so let me open up the screen again. All right, so let's say, for example, you have a need for chickens, right? So you have a chicken coop somewhere, and chickens that run around in your chicken coop. Here's a chicken, there's a chicken, these are chickens. Right? But for whatever reason, you have someone in your community who's like, man, I absolutely hate chickens. I can't stand to be around chickens. Like, no, just no. And so you want the chickens to be somewhere where you can get to them you're going to like visit them like daily almost, right? To get the eggs during laying season at least. But then, you know, later on in the winter, if you're in a cold climate place, then a cold, you know, or a 4-season place, you're not going to go out there so much. So where do you put the chicken coop, right? And this person's like, I can't be around the chickens. Like, they freak me out. Like, let's assume this person goes into full panic mode. So you have the principle now, first of relative location. We want the chicken coop near the house and near the garden, right? And maybe even have a compost pile in here to help feed the chickens, provide heat in winter, things like that. But that can't be too close to the house either. So what do you do, right? So some of the other principles are, yeah, co-location is good. These things are close together, and that. But then you have this limiting factor, this external factor that says this isn't going to work. And so you have to address the needs of that external factor. We call that a sector, right? Something that is kind of a little bit external to the functioning of the system. Then what do you do about it? That kind of disrupts how you would ideally create something. And so you have to then understand that diversity is an important characteristic also, right? So this person, they're allergic to the chickens, but at the same time, maybe they're the wisest person in your group, right? And so you can't say, well, you go away, and for whatever reason, chickens are the best, source of meat and whatever, because gosh, you get feathers for pillows and blankets and stuff, and clothes, and they provide meat, and they eat bugs, and feather dusters and all this stuff. They can keep your garden free of bugs too. All these things, heck, make flutes out of their bones, whatever. So they're very, very versatile things. So you don't want to get rid of them. You can sell the eggs, sell the chickens, get income. So you don't want to do that. So then you have to balance these two competing things of diversity in your ecosystem and the functionality that you get from having these things in close proximity. And then you just have to, make a decision about which one is more important. And a characteristic of a system is going to be more important than a design principle overall, right? So this should dominate your decision making. And so you'll move this to a place that is perhaps less convenient, but not terribly inconvenient. Or there might be a simpler solution, which might be what? Well, they're not the only person there, right? So a simpler solution might be you never have a responsibility to deal with the chickens. Nice, simple thing, right? It's a very simple little solution. Just don't deal with the chickens. But, you don't want to, maybe you want to avoid accidents or whatever. So you decide that this is, instead of being in zone 1 or 2 where it normally is, it needs to be out in zone 3, further away from the house, so that this person can be happy. And so maybe you find other interactions for that thing. Maybe you decide that instead of the kitchen garden and the chickens being close together, instead what you do is you have them close to your crop garden so that the fertilizing is easier, right? That kind of thing. So you can regain some functionality by going back to the principles and saying, well, we need to build in some efficiency by co-location. So let's put that out by the crop gardens. And it's not as good as having it near the house, but it's close enough because we go to the we deal with the crops on a nearly daily basis or daily basis also. So that'll work. That's okay. That'll work. And so you use these to help shape your decision making. I know this seems kind of obvious probably, but I'm just trying to illustrate how the interplay between things happen and can happen so that you don't just start making willy-nilly decisions. You check everything against these principles and the characteristics so that you make good decisions. And if you do that, you're very likely to end up with a well-functioning system. Maybe not wholly sustainable. That's going to depend on your skill level, your knowledge level, etc. But if you apply these, you're going to end up with good functioning. And if you apply them well, you're going to have a regenerative system when you're done. So that's what we're trying to get to, and understanding that these principles and characteristics, and I'm sorry, this whole thing didn't go exactly how I had hoped it would go, And so this isn't, I think, as clear as it could have been or should have been. But hopefully you're seeing that these ideas exist out in nature. They're not, none of this comes from a book. I didn't read any books about this. Well, the principles come from books. That comes from Mollison and that, but the characteristics don't. They come from observing natural human and natural systems. That's where they come from, and how they function, what they do. But the work of observing the natural systems in terms of functioning and how to construct them, Mollison did that. Holmgren did that. I don't need to do that again. Indigenous people have done that for 80,000 years. So I don't really need to do that part again. I trust that they got that pretty well right. And because when I try to apply these things, it works. It makes sense. So we have, if the correct characteristics are what I think they are, and when the principles are as well tested as they seem to be, and we start making our decisions based on those things, then we should be in good shape. But that's not what we're doing. That's the problem. That's not what we're doing. You know, a permaculturalist is doing that in their design process, and etc. But society is not doing this. We're not thinking that we need to recreate the modern world to be egalitarian, to be you know, radically autonomous individually, to be intimately connected to our ecosystem, to be small scale. And that matches the principles, by the way. You know, in the one of the principles is that you design from patterns to details, but then when you start constructing the system, you build it in small chunks. You put in the small pieces one at a time, and you don't do it all at one time. Like these days, we might design, you know, like a neighborhood or a city and just build the whole damn thing at one time. And then if something doesn't work in that system, you're stuck with it, and you end up spending a lot of energy fixing things. Whereas if you build it in small chunks as you go, you can check the functioning, and you never have to tear the whole thing out. You might have to tear the most recent piece out because it doesn't function as you thought it would, but you don't have to tear the whole thing out. And so it's much more efficient long term than the way we do things today, because unless you just are not a good designer, you just don't know what you're doing, you're not going to have to like start from scratch again, start over. You shouldn't need to do that if you do it well, if you know what you're doing. So all of this leads us to, if you accept that these things might have merit, that the definition of sustainability or regenerativeness might have merit, that these characteristics have merit, that the principles have merit, then we can ask ourselves, can we design a system for bioregional management that honors these and works by these, right? And so we look at this, and we have commons, we have egalitarianism, we have needs-based, we have consume within the ecosystem functions, individual autonomy, all these things, networks, etc., right? So what I have proposed, and I need to go out and get an image for you. Is this. All right, so if you look at that graphic, if you follow that link and look at that graphic, you'll see it should be circular, but when I made this a long time ago in the winter of 2011, 2012, my graphic skills were non-existent, and they still are. I have not improved that any. But most of the concepts are here in this tiny little space. So, so we want egalitarian decision making, right? But how do you do that at large scale? How do you do egalitarian decision making with 700,000, a million, 10 million, 12 million people. It's a problem. And so what this suggests is that we take, I should probably, do a screen share here, and so I can point to things as I'm talking. All right, now let me go again to the image. So this image is actually the original. This is the original version of this that I had. And so what we have is in the center, that's what we're going to focus on for now. So over on the left, though, bottom left, you have General Assembly. This all came out of the Occupy movement. I made this as the Occupy movement was dying. And I originally called this Perm Occupy, permaculture, anyway. And so the General Assemblies worked in an egalitarian basis, right? You had the whole group, and then you had work groups that would, do some thinking and planning and say, here's what we think we should do. And you bring it back to the group and they say, okay, or they say, no, go back and think some more. But that's just one of many different ways of decision making. The key is that it's egalitarian. So the question is, how do you make it egalitarian over very large numbers of people? And so the smallest circle is walkable communities, right? And let me open up my annotations. There we go. So the walkable communities here just means small communities, right? The walkable was big at the time, so that's the term I used. So small communities, and what we find in indigenous communities is networks of communities that are small, and depending on the ecosystem, if it was a very abundant ecosystem, they might be within a few hours of walk of each other, or even less, if there's enough resources there. In other areas, like an area of Africa or Southern California, maybe it might be a day's walk or something, so that you're spread out enough to support all of the people in that area. But walkable communities, small communities in networks. And so the network is, of course, you can see the local network is supposed to be represented by this ring, small communities connected together. And then you have cities and or areas, right? And that would actually, this is bad for that, in that it should be like a network of small communities, and then another network of small communities. And these are connected together. That's where you get into this. This is kind of this level, right? And then you might need an intermediate space here for a region. If you're talking about a big enough place, like the Mississippi River drainage is massive, right? You would have to have that extra level in there for area or regional organization, most likely. So the way you think about that is you have the entire Mississippi system, but then you have like the Platte River, which is its own well-defined drainage system, which defines a bioregion, right? A sub-region of the bioregion. And so you'd probably need that at that level. But other ones are quite small. Other bioregions are really small, defined by a valley almost, or there's some very small watersheds. It's not all watersheds, but that's a pretty good corollary for what most bioregions. And then bioregional, right? So you need these levels. So how do you do this? At this level, at the community level, if you have, say, an empty lot that's just sitting there, what we do now is we have to go to the city council, get permission to put something there, go to the planning department, blah, 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 blah. Why? What do they know about your community? Nothing. So why do we do that? Because we've created these hierarchies that are meaningless. And so why shouldn't community level decision making be a thing? And any decision that only affects that community, why shouldn't it be their thing to make, right? And then as you go up the scale, let's say then you have an issue of a stream that feeds into a river, and it only runs through like 4 or 5 neighborhoods in a city. Then, and someone on that wants to alter it in some way, put in a little dam or maybe dig out a canal off of it or whatever, and it's going to affect the functioning of it. Does the whole city need to be involved in that? Maybe, or maybe just those 4 communities need to, right? And so there's no reason why, depending on the scale of the problem, that the decision making can't be scale based. But then what if you get up to something at the city level that really is like the whole city, like like the avenues or the lighting or the water system? Then maybe you need to get a group of people together to to do problem solving at that level. And then what if there is an issue? Let's say like these days we have a big problem with flooding, right? Pakistan's 1/3 underwater. It's probably still, partially underwater. That's a bioregional problem. And let's say that a storm is coming and that flooding is possible. Then you'd want to get a bioregional level decision making in place to create a plan that is for, in this case, the entire country. And so you do it at that level. But the key, and what I think might be an innovation with regard to this, is not just the fractal leveling of it and doing things at scale, but that you also, it's non-hierarchical, right? So let's say that little community decides to do something with that lot. That's not going to affect anyone else. It doesn't matter. They can do what they want. But let's say that the 3 communities or 4 communities are going to do something on that little tributary that could affect the larger river. Someone might notice and say, you know what, I think maybe we need to talk to everybody, because what you're planning to do, in my opinion, will affect the larger system. And so those communities don't get to just do what they want if it will affect other people. But if it won't, they do. And then same thing at the higher levels. Let's say that at the bioregional level, there's the storm coming or what have you. Let's say it's the storm, but let's say they know it's coming. They got 3, 4, 5 days, and they can make some major adjustments if they need to. They can't just tell everyone, hey, do this. That shouldn't be the case. What they should be able to do, though, is say, we have a plan, and then flow it back down through the groups and make sure that it's not going to destroy some part of the ecosystem, because it could. Maybe it's really bad for some people in there, and they need to figure out a way to come up with a better plan. Now, ideally, though, in this case, you're talking about emergency management, and that would actually be a little bit different process, just like it is today. So this isn't the greatest example for this, but if you want to extend it out and say long term, we expect extreme flooding of 2 or 3 times the level we experience today at some point in the future. So we need to do some earthworks, we need to do some movement, blah blah blah. Then they should have to go back and check through all the levels, make sure that if they want to, let's say they decide, this community has got to go. Then that community should have the right to say no and say, let's find a better solution. But they need to sit together and see if that really is true. And if it is true, then of course they have to work that out. But they shouldn't be able to just tell that community, you're gone. That's just, to me, that's just not right. Because when you make human waste of humans, you're doing the same thing as cutting down a forest or something. You can't do that. If you displace people, disrupt people, and do it against their will and do it without their input and don't provide any solutions, whatever, you're going to create problems down the line. So you need to be able to have a process where there is this scale-based decision-making, but it can't be hierarchical. It shouldn't be hierarchical, let's say, but there might be cases, especially in an emergency, where it does become that. But outside of an emergency, it shouldn't. We should be able to work together to solve these problems. So we jumped to this a lot faster in a way that I didn't want to do. So we only have 3 minutes left, and I don't know if people have to go to other places. I better look at the calendar. Let me stop the share for a second. And let's look at the calendar. So what I learned tonight is, wow, I really need to work up. I really need to work on this as a presentation or whatever if I'm going to do this, try to get people to understand this, because this was not smooth. Yeah, there's an angel, there's a hangout with Melina Angel coming up. I don't know if any of you want to go to that. In lieu of that, if you're going to hang out for a second, questions, observations, criticisms, you can beat me over the head. I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy with how this went. I think I could have done much better, but it is
okay.
what it is for
Thank
tonight.
you. Thanks for sharing. This is really helpful. I would say, yeah, if you could, just put this into one page in a sense and share it with the rest of, or the core team in a sense. Say, look, this is one input, and it might be good to connect with the other views and definitions of resilience and regeneration. But yeah, it'd be good. I fully agree with you that this is fundamental, really, and so it'd be good to see where the community stands on these topics, whether we can reach agreement or not. But thank you, thanks Killian, for your time and for sharing all these thoughts and your experience on this.
Well, thank you, Dominique, and for your patience, especially in sitting through all this.
It's okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks. So
I
Elise,
appreciate for taking time and holding this space once again. A special thank you for that. And I think we can have one talk, and I may help you for the presentation if you want, because I understand that it's like it's another thing to put all this information in this, like, design based. I use Canva, for example, and it needs some kind of different kinds of skills. Like some people are not in peace with these tools, and I can help you with that if you want, and then we can talk more about my project, etc. That will be good work exchange maybe. And but I appreciate for all this. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you. I mean, you guys really helped with refining that definition. That just was amazing. I never expected that. That was great. So
okay. Maybe Elif, just a quick one. Elif, I don't know if we can exchange emails. I don't know how we do that, but happy to help as well on your initiative. Help you think about it, if that can be of any support.
Definitely, it will be great. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. Dominique, where are you physically? Are you
London? So French background, but based in London.
Okay.
And sorry, go ahead, Uhuru. I didn't want to cut you through.
Oh, sorry. Uhuru?
Yes. Thank you, Killian, for the presentation. And it's really making me think about how to introduce these concepts to people who are academics, as well as folks who are maybe learning in different ways, and to a wide variety of folks who are already working on these concepts, as well as those who are not. So I think that your intention was felt around making that introduction. And, I really experienced it as a modeling exercise. You have been modeling for me how to make that introduction and some things to consider in that process. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And yeah, I mean, do realize that a lot of this is just my thinking. This is not necessarily, a lot of this is not mainstream at all. So how applicable other people think it is what it is. But
for me, it is mainstream. So like, actually, it was a surprise to hear some of the choice of language you were saying, like we're not doing this, we're not doing this. So I'm wondering, where are you? Where are you located? And because it sounds like this is like not really common in your circles.
I don't think it's common in any circles. This is part of the problem.
Yeah, I think that these concepts are pretty accessible at in the circles that I'm in, not necessarily all together, but there are circles where these are some common, where they're common. Where are you based?
Well, I'm in Korea, but that's not that's not the problem.
You're in Korea, okay.
Yeah, but that's not really
and Korea
the
has the KMF, the Korean, that
KNF, right?
Yeah, KNF method, and so yeah, I think that maybe for this group of this, yeah, there's just like, as a facilitator, I guess I have like curiosity about ways of doing this presentation, and also giving this people access to this knowledge, at the same time making it participatory, giving folks opportunity to share where they're at and to exchange.
Well, that was the idea. That was the idea. I just didn't quite make it happen. That was the problem. But yeah, the problem that I find in this is like that list of characteristics that doesn't exist anywhere else. You know, not as a list, and certainly not that list, right? And that's not even complete. There's like 4 other characteristics that go with it. It doesn't exist anywhere that I'm aware of, right? And I think it's really important that people understand that when we are talking about drawing from indigenous systems, we're not talking about copying them. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about living in the jungle. We're not talking about, teepees. We're not talking about yurts in Mongolia. I mean, those are great. I mean, they're great places to live, actually. They're very nice places. But we're talking about applying the principles and the characteristics. That's what so that your decision making and your design process in your context makes sense, right? That's what we're talking about. But if we don't have this shared ideas about what these principles and characteristics are, that's potentially a big problem, because we're going to design very different things. And if some of those concepts aren't regenerative, then what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with non-regenerative design. And that's my fear. And is what I think is the big problem. Like now today, everyone's like, hey, electric cars. There's nothing sustainable about an electric car. There's actually nothing sustainable about wind power or solar power. None of those things are sustainable. And that's not to say don't do that, or those are evil, or those are bad. It's to say, think a minute. If those aren't sustainable, let alone regenerative, what are the implications of that in what we should be doing with our design choices for our cities and our governance and everything? That's the point. It's not to say don't do that, but that's what most people think. When I start saying this, they go, oh, you want us to live in caves. No, I didn't say that. That's not the point at all. The point is, apply these principles and characteristics and understanding what that tells you about these systems so that you can make wise decisions. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I don't know if you guys have a bit more time. I was just curious, have you bumped into any example where, a transition from current world practice into a regenerative practice has been established? Because clearly these are quite bold, I mean, it's easier when you start from scratch in a sense, and maybe as a group of people, you buy a new land and you create a new community, than evolving a city of 10 million inhabitants, or a region of 50 million inhabitants, or maybe 20 million inhabitants. Have we come into that stage of piloting and testing principles of regeneration, or are we still early stage?
I think we're very definitely early stage, even though we've had villages and intentional communities, etc., for a very long time. The modern world is early stage, right? Of course, we have indigenous communities that are already there, but again, it's a question. If you ask someone from New York, do you want to live, like the people who live deep in the Amazon, they're going to say no. But then, how do we transform New York, right? That's the question. How do we transform that? And of course, there's a lot more that comes into this that would take hours to share. about energy, about returns on energy, about resources, resource curves, how close we are to like a quick example. If you listen to the Michaud interviews, either the one I did with him or some of the other people did with him, you're going to hear him say something like, and I asked a specific question, and can we do any of these things? Can we take any of these systems, whether just choose one, wind, solar, it doesn't matter. Can we take any one of them, even the recycling system, a truly global recycling? Can we build any one of them? And if so, for how long? And his answer was, well, kind of, you could like take one of them. You might be able to do it for like somewhere between 1 and 3 generations. And that means generations of that technology, not generations of people. And so that means like for wind power, you're talking like 25 to 30 years, right? Solar, the same thing. So, so over you might have 1 century of resources to do that. 1 century maximum for just one of them. The minute you add another one, that shortens it down. You add another one, it shortens it down. And so you end up with, can we do this for even 1 generation? And the answer is no. You can't do it. You can't do wind, solar, geothermal, blah, 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 all at the same time for even 1 generation. And this is so important to understand. And yet, how many people do you hear talking about this? Very, very few. How many people understand that all these cars and windmills, because that's what they're hey, let's build these windmills, let's get solar here, let's get wind there, and you can't do it, right? You simply can't do it. So and it's not to say again that that's bad, evil, or anything else. It's to say you need to think about this. This has to be this is a design issue. And that's what I try to do. I try to make it, this is all about design. It's all about pragmatism. It's not about ideology, beliefs, or anything else. I don't care why you're doing what you're doing. I care that you understand the math behind it. That's what matters. You got to understand the math behind it. And if you don't, then how do you make good decisions? And so we're not making good decisions. Even the decisions we're making within the regenerative space are not actually sensible when you think of it down to that level. Right, because I'm sure, Elif, that you are talking about, hey, we need to build solar panels or windmills or blah blah blah, so we have energy, right? And everybody's doing that.
This is nothing. They want to have this new virtual reality. What is it? NFT? What is this?
Okay.
They want to copy the village there, and I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, I cannot stop you, but that definitely says something that I should be here, like within this community, to somehow offset the other
Right.
side of impact. Yeah.
Right. And so there's this huge disconnect between what is truly regenerative, sustainable, and what people are talking about doing and thinking is sustainable and regenerative. And then there's the whole issue of timeframes and what about that risk analysis? How much time do we have before the ecosystem really flips? Because the scientists, they're making best guesses. They say 9 years or 10 years or 50. It's a guess. It's not an actual number. It's not a real number, right? And so we get into all that. There's so much to talk about with this. I was trying to keep this conversation today about, here's the principles, here's the this, and here's this little model. So do you think it makes sense to say, you know what, let's have networks, let's have little sets of communities in an ecosystem, then connect them? Does that make sense to you? Right? And let's do decision making in this fractal, non-hierarchical way. Does that make sense? That's all I'm trying to say today. I'm trying to ask those questions. Say, these decision-making criteria make sense to me. This way of organizing it within Bioregion makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? That's all I'm really trying to do today. Because if you go beyond that, because at the design level, the complexities are massive, massive.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you. I mean, maybe just as an aside, on your point around renewable energy is not regenerative. So what will be a regenerative renewable energy?
A mechanical one? A technological one?
Well, I don't know.
Does it exist? No.
Do we have a
No.
renewable?
No.
Well, what about little water mills on the sides of rivers that is not intrusive, so not a big dam, but there is a technology which is creating little energy out of river flows, water flows. But would that not be? I mean, it does require resources to build it, and you need some
Right.
metal, but
Right.
I guess I don't know. I mean, but the challenge, because if there's no regenerative energy, then wow. So how do we handle that? I mean,
That's exactly the point. That's exactly the problem. And so let's walk through this a minute. So you have a factory building little water generators. It's a factory. Where does the factory come from? Right? How do you build a sustainable factory? Right?
That's okay.
And
we can do that. I mean, I don't see a challenge in building a sustainable regenerative factory.
well, you can build one or two. You can't build a whole world of them for the reason we already talked about. The resources don't
Well,
exist,
you can
right?
build as much as the ecosystem where you are can handle.
Now, here's the question. To make that sustainable, what do you need? You need fully recyclable materials, yes? As a minimum.
Yes, it could be wood.
We do not have, well, you're not going to make a whole factory out of wood.
Yes,
But
you can. It's already done. Some people are doing it already.
well, what kind of factory? Manufacturing what?
Well, we build houses, and I'm sure we can build factories in wood. It has existed before, and it's being redone now. It doesn't need to be in metal.
But not just the shell. We're talking about the shell and the machines and everything in there, the power source, all this stuff.
For sure.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
So as a total thing, we can't, right? However, we could if we could recycle everything. But here's some bad news for you. We currently know how to recycle about 70% of what we produce. 30% of it, it's not that we don't have the capacity, we don't even know how to recycle 30% of what we produce. So that's a pile of trash that is just growing day after day after day after day on the planet. And that pile will eventually overwhelm everything else if we just keep going, right? So this is the problem. This is why the comment I made in the previous space, right? That we should be focusing on not only building out recycling, but focusing on and prioritizing building out the ability to recycle. Because without that, none of this is possible at the scales that people are talking about. It's possible at this scale here and there. It's not possible globally in any way, shape, or form. And these are just
maybe I
numbers.
don't know
math,
which are the
science,
materials
blah,
in
blah,
the 30%, but maybe it's to switch off of them, or see if maybe new research and development are feasible. But but I guess on the energy. So I don't know. I mean, so have you bumped into any source of energy that you personally would call regenerative energy?
The sun. That's it. There's only one.
Okay, but you're not going to feed,
Okay. Well, all
a
right.
village
So let's
or
go
a city.
back. Well, we do though. Actually, we do. We call it farming, right?
No, well, but the farmers use a bit more than just for the farming and for the plants.
But you got to remember, there are tens of thousands of years where there was no chemical fertilizer.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not talking about chemical fertilizer. I'm talking about energy for potentially lightning or whatever activities. So I don't know. So let's imagine what would be the regenerative community, and what would be the sources of energy? Is it wood? Is it?
Well, again, it all depends on what you're talking about, the scale you're talking about, and the time frame you're talking about, and what are you willing to do, right? And how long are you willing to be patient, right? So let's say that today here, okay, let me tell you my plan. I think that would kind of lay it out for you. So if I were king of the world, this is what I would do. I would immediately make a decree that all farming and gardening must be regenerative, right? And that's easy. That part's easy. We can do that in 5 years. The entire world can be regenerative farming and gardening in 5 years easy. Now, you'd probably actually stagger it because you have some decrease in production for a little while at the beginning if the soils are greatly depleted. If they're not, it doesn't matter. But if the soils are very depleted, there's a little bit of drop off for a short time.
Yeah.
Not in total nutrients, but in terms of weight, there's a drop off. And so you have to deal with that. And so you'd probably stagger it a little bit. So let's say 10 years. 10 years, whole world can be regenerative, no problem, because it's really easy and simple to do for a farmer to just switch over. The hard part is convincing them to do it, actually. That's actually the hard part. The other part is scale. You have farmers with 10,000 acres. Well, they've got to use tractors and combines and all this stuff. That's not regenerative, never will be, never can be. Not at least until we can recycle literally everything on the planet. But that is decades away at best.
No, but even for other ecosystem reasons, you can't. Scale is you cannot manage pests in an ecological way with size.
There we go.
It needs to be a 1 to 2 hectare size max. So
exactly, and so we have to figure out how to convince the world to go to small holdings.
Yeah,
small holdings are very productive, right? You know that. You obviously know all this. And so we have to go to small holdings. All these huge agriculture companies need to disappear. But that's okay, because the entire financial system needs to disappear. It's non-regenerative, can't be made regenerative. So get rid of it. Just stop doing that. No financing, because if you're living in a commons, why do you need financing? You don't need financing for a commons at all. You don't need banks, you don't need anything, because everyone shares everything. There's nothing to steal. There's nothing to protect because everyone's sharing it all. It's the solutions are so easy, right? If you really wanted to do this right, and this is not what I propose because it will never happen. It should happen, but it never will. Is you would start, the very first thing you would do is have a jubilee, global jubilee of all forms of debt right now, today, done. And that makes everything else possible, because now nothing needs to be paid for by anybody. You can just move resources where they're needed to be. So if we were an intelligent species, that's what we would do. And we don't. We're not smart, and so we're not going to do that. But that would be the first step.
Maybe just to continue then on your plan. So, okay, on farming, we can move into regenerative farming and gardening. Then
Right.
How would you handle energy management?
Right. And so the key to that is actually the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit of consumption is stop consuming, right? And so simplicity and localization is how you do that, right? So if you we're not going to declare the commons, so we have this weird, bad, nasty transition period of people still having jobs, working for companies, blah blah blah, and some of that is just going to have to be a certain amount of biting the bullet and just dealing with that pain of this transition. But we have to be really careful about not leaving people behind, if at all possible. And we shouldn't need to. And so my proposal is to start building those bioregional networks, right? And like right now, when people start an eco-village, they go, here's my eco-village. So I'm talking to you right now, Elif. Okay, this is for you. You're building your eco-village, and then there's gonna be another eco-village over in Sudan and another one over in Siberia. No, stop doing that. That's not what we need to do. What we need is you build your eco-village here, and other people in Turkey, don't build one in this part of Turkey. Don't build one over here. Build another one 10 miles away, and then build another one 10 miles from there, and build a network there and make a network, and then another network, and then another network, another network within a bioregion. Choose somewhere to start. Or you have multiples. Okay, you're starting your bioregion, you're starting yours, you're starting in yours. But build networks. Don't do individual things and another individual one over here, another individual one over here. That is just, how do they support each other? How do they support each other like that? You need small local networks.
In which region are you developing the community, Elif?
I'm in Turkey, and the place is called Çanakkale. And very actually critical location, tell you the truth, if you see on the map, and very historical. It's very powerful. Troy happened there. If you are
okay, so you're
familiar
down
with it,
like in the west, far west.
If you type Çanakkale on Google Map, I will type for you.
If I could spell that, I would.
I did. I send it to you now. It's
And to Killian's point, is this the first, I guess, eco-village being built in the area, in the region?
No, actually, there are some attempts and there are some eco-villages in Turkey. However, this is quite different in terms of content.
Okay.
Concept and content, yeah, and probably it will be one of the biggest one.
Okay, wow. But are you already connected with the other eco-villages to be able to create that support network that Killian is talking about?
No, the characteristic of our project is kind of like we are international community, and one person is leading at the moment who is an ambassador of Turkey, and he's kind of using his whole network right now. So we are not connected to the eco-villages in the region, but we are connected to many, like several projects around the world.
Right,
Like I
so,
need to show you some pictures for you to make sense what I'm talking about, and I have all those pictures actually. Recently, I have worked on the kind of the. I don't know if I can share the screen. I would love to show you.
well, can you share?
But like another time, maybe we are recording. We are
Yeah, I
using
know.
the
We're going.
platform. But yeah, and
I mean,
yeah.
it's okay.
Well,
it's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
But I can tell you this, Dominic, I'm sorry, but I can tell you this. We are 3 of us, or maybe 4 of us, who have done the EDE, which is Eco-Village Design Education course. And we are connected to the Gen directly.
Okay.
Right. So let me ask you.
That's a benefit.
So I have 2 things. That one is a question to make a point, and the other one is a suggestion. So the first one's make a point. When you did your EDE, did you hear any of this that we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, like not the concept
Not
of
exactly,
regenerative, not exactly in this combination of the terms, but I think they are all like
list of characteristics.
Kind of, yeah.
Anything like a list of characteristics?
Well, I was working with the economic working group, so we have dived deep into this topic and we have been discussing about regenerativity, so I know those things. But list of characteristics as you propose,
no, certainly not exactly that list.
Not like
exactly
that, yeah.
Okay, so that's the point there is not to say they're wrong or anything like that. It's to say I think there's a value to globally the people that are in this space kind of getting some common ground there. I think that's really kind of useful. But so my challenge to you would be in establishing this eco-village would be you're going to need to be part of networks, right? And I don't mean like here's the eco-village and okay, there's Ankara. I'm talking about nearby. That's how you build resilience is you create within your bioregion, networks within your bioregion. So the challenge is going to be when you get to thinking about expansion, don't think about, oh, let's put one over in this other part of Turkey. Put it next door. It would be my challenge to you. So that you're building that resilience locally, because someone has to do it. And if all the eco-villages are here and there, nobody has resilience, and I don't see how that works for us.
So
right? And then I'm sorry, just one more quick.
Yeah, sorry.
One more quick point is, to the extent that it will take time to get to the point where not only do you build this one, but then are ready to expand, there's time involved. And so do try to start making networks connections to the existing places around you, because they may not be the same, but it doesn't matter as long as you're willing to support each other.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just like thinking the scale of the project and like thinking about the possible collaborations that we would need. Yeah, so it's also the matter of people's mindset who are organizing this. So that I'm like kind of inviting them to keep the trade in a bioregional level, but I need to introduce the bioregion. I did tried my best during one of the space meeting where we organized the like the architectural design of the place, and I was like a kind of offering them like, let's observe the nature there for a year, like let's this kind of permacultural aspects that they already know. But when it comes to keep the trading or networking originally, they find it limited. They find it that like it kind of in their idea it needs to be more expanded and entire world to be known and to be like, you know, well work, you know, to be successful. And this is kind of this is kind of, that's why I was thinking like socially, how we do that socially, like,
right? Because see, everyone still has this idea of, actually they'll talk about, oh, let's do locally, but they really are still thinking, oh, it's all global. I'm still going to get, you know, food from over there. We're going to get clothes from over there. They think all that's going to stay in place. And yet, if you want to have a successfully functioning system where we haven't killed the ecosystem, all that has to stop. Most of that has to stop. There should be virtually no interbioregional stuff going on for a period of time, probably, in order to allow the earth to heal. I really think that's going to end up being what we get to. There's going to be a period where, like, hey, stay in your own bioregion for a while, folks. And but
another lockdown.
Yeah, kind of a lockdown. Yeah, it is. Sadly, another kind of lockdown. But this issue of how you build the next eco village, because that should be the goal, is expansion, right? Not for expansion's sake, but for creating that network, right? You have time. It's going to be a while before that comes up. You know, years before that happens. So you have time to work on that. But that, I'm hoping you'll keep in your head and try to inculcate into their heads over time.
I do my best.
That's
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And Kilian, I mean, do you know of any good books or any good other practitioners, you know, that has tried to go into the level of detail and practicality that Elif is going through now? So again, you know, thinking of farming, thinking of energy, water, you know, all kind of systems and that are needed for a village.
Well, she's already been through the EDE. You know, that's what. Now, I haven't been through the EDE, mind you. I haven't been through it, so I don't know exactly what they teach you. But I have a concept for this myself. But my answer to you quickly is not. I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask.
It's okay. No, but you haven't bumped into that kind of resource or that kind of books yet.
Well, because I haven't looked into it much, because I'm not in a place to actually do an eco village per se. You know, maybe Elif will invite me to come live in Turkey or something, and then maybe I'll have an eco village. But right now, I can't do one. I don't have any money.
We're coming to Turkey, Elif.
Yeah, definitely. Give me 1 year to build it first. Like, we are still in the very early stage. No, you need to come early. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, you need us now. You need us in the beginning.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Dominic, if you give me some time, I have a friend who is like really on this topic, and he loves reading, so I might get some information from him. And I have this kind of how do you say, like the file, every regenerative I have some things that I can provide you if you want.
Okay, fantastic, very good.
Yeah.
So Dominic, part of the problem that we have is, I'm sure there are resources out there about, hey, this is how you start an eco village. Matter of fact, I know there are. And there's the Eco Village Training Center at the Farm Eco Village in Virginia, which is very famous, run by by Albert Bates, who's just a brilliant man. He's in his 70s now, though. I'm starting to worry that he's not going to be around much longer, and that would be a huge tragedy for us all. But yeah, that if you don't know who he is, you need to know. Yeah, I mean, he's just a brilliant man. And in fact, in terms of climate change, he co-wrote a book called Burn, which is about biochar, that was published in 2021. So definitely someone to know. And this book, Retro Suburbia, if you know people that are trying to adapt in place in cities or towns, that's a book to read. And that's by David Holmgren, who is one of the founders of permaculture. But what he's in that book, he talks about how to try to transition in a suburban or urban way. There's also a book called Gaia's Garden, which is a similar kind of thing. There are lots of books like that that are about how to be, do permaculture and blah blah blah. But we're talking about a little bit different scale of things here tonight, right? And that book doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. This model that I'm sharing with you is my model. It came out of my head 12 years ago, 13 years ago, 2011, whenever that was, 12 years ago, 11. And there's the thing interesting about this is like the idea of how to do decision making egalitarian. That's not new. Absolutely not new. There's nothing new about this, except for the fractal hierarchy, fractal decision making at scale. That's the only thing that is really unique about it, and that I didn't read that from anybody. The idea of commons just seems obvious to me and to other people. And I know that everyone, when you say commons, everyone goes, "Oh, Eleanor Ostrom," but I didn't read Eleanor Ostrom. I know nothing about Eleanor other than I went to the wiki page to see what are her characters. Okay, not bad. I got all my information about this stuff from looking at intact communities. That's where it came from for me. And so I'm always saying, look to nature, then talk to the scholars. And then people yell at me for insulting the scholars. I'm like, where do you think they got their information? They got, I mean, come on. But that's what happens. Exactly. It happened today. Ben yelled at me kind of about that. He's like, what do you mean? Talking about, I'm like, no, dude, come on. The real knowledge is over there. Trust it. Yes.
I am curious about one thing, actually. Like, I witnessed the conversation between Daniel and you today, and like about blocking, and I was like wondering what kind of conversation you two can have, and ended up like blocking each other on social medias, and like I was surprised actually. Like
I piss people off a lot. I'm really direct, and so like, if Daniel says something and I'm like, but Daniel, that's not true because blah, blah, blah. I don't do this NVC type talk stuff. Oh, Daniel, it's so nice to talk to you. And, that's a really interesting point you made. And, but I wonder if you would consider maybe that this other thing might be possibly something you should consider because maybe, but I don't mean to push on you. I don't do that. It's that exhausts me. That wears me out. Oh my God. I just say, Daniel, no, that's Daniel, that's not true. Come on, dude. And you can't tell people that have status that they're wrong. That's the lesson here. You can't tell people with status, with PhDs or whatever, that they're wrong about something without them getting really pissed off about it. It's really rare for that not to happen.
I don't agree about this because I don't think so, or I didn't have any such a response like that when I had because I'm not caring, like I don't have too much information, but if I speak with my heart, then I trust my heart is speaking the bigger mind. That's right. If I don't know if it makes sense to you. That's why I am kind of like brave to show up in every spaces and ask for help or share my opinion, because that's the key point. Like I don't need to finish the PhD to be able to speak those things, because I share the one common consciousness. That's where I started. Okay, this is not scientific. I can understand.
No, you're just nice. This is let's make this very simple. You're just gentler in your conversation than I am, and you don't make people feel like they're stupid, but I do. So, and it's unintentional. That's not what I'm trying to do, but that's what happens.
Yeah, you are also sympathetic, I think, like when you speak this way, like, but I was wondering about, I'm not here to, you also have your way of being sympathetic, if it makes sense. Like you have your own way of joking, like, so it's like, if it's recording, so I'm worried. I'm not into to gossip here. It's not my intention at all. But my question was,
I don't even think about the damn recording. See,
what was the topic that you had this, like, what was the topic exactly? Which part of the
I have no idea what
practices?
No, it would have been years ago. I have no idea what it was, what bothered him. But I get this, like climate scientists, right? They have no business talking about policy. They have no business, because they to a person virtually, none of them understand anything about regenerative systems. They understand the Earth system at the meta level, and then they think they can apply that to the micro level. Economists are the same way. Economists all mostly work at the macro level. That's most of their work. Steve Keen works at the macro level. I love Steve Keen. I love what he does. But when it gets down to the micro, he starts to get wrong about things, because he doesn't understand these regenerative principles and stuff. He doesn't understand how things have to connect, that inputs and outputs must connect, and that you can measure gross flows and it can look like it's working. But then when you get down to the micro level, it's actually having these little turbulences and stuff, and the energy is not going where you actually think it's going. And so these gross flows eventually are going to fall apart. But he doesn't get that yet. And I've been talking to him for since 2010 about this. It's been 12 years. But here's the funny thing about Steve Keen, though, is he has his model, which is a great model for a steady state economy, for what is now called a donut economy, right? That he produced a long time ago. And he's been refining it all these years. And in 2010, we were at a local futures. There's like the lady that's been presenting a couple of times, Local Futures, who helped co-found Local Futures. Well, there was a Local Futures conference in Michigan, and he came, and that's where I met him, and that's where I met Albert Bates, and he presented his model. And I know nothing about economics in terms of like academically, but I have a good grounding in the basic underlying functions of economics because of my time on the oil drum. And not because I'm smart, but because other people told me stuff. I went, okay, that makes sense. But they were smart and I listened. That's all that happened. And so I began to have this understanding, and I started seeing these things echoed in different places. So by the time I met Steve Keen, I'm like, he's presenting his model and he's like, it has profit and it has, well, just profit. And I looked at it and I said, you can't have profit in a circular system. It doesn't work. You literally can't do that. And because profit coming out of a system acts as it's a proxy for energy and a proxy for consumption, right? So if you're sequestering some of that energy away constantly, what must happen to the system? It must shrink, right? It must shrink and eventually become unstable. And that's what we see. Look at the Earth today. It is in a huge mess because rich people keep taking stuff out of the system and keeping it for themselves. That is the crux of what we're experiencing. And then all the rest of us are following suit and being consumers too, because we've been told that's a good thing. And so we're all taking energy out of the system in one way or another. And we all have to stop doing that. Just some of us have to do it more than others. And so I told him this. I'm like, you can't do that, Steve. That can't, you're calling that, circular. It's not circular because you have profit and ownership in that system. Both of those sequester energy out of the system. At that simple basic level, your model doesn't work. And that was obvious to me, right? Because and you're shaking your head, Dominique, you understand what I'm saying, obviously, right? Because it is really obvious once you break it down to that level. But when you're thinking in terms of, oh, this economic law, that economic law, it's very easy to miss this stuff.
And what
It's
did
very
he say
easy
then in
to-
response?
He just blew me off. He just thought I was wrong, right? And so I kept on. But we were connected on Facebook. So every once on Facebook, I'd say, "So Steve, do you still have profit and ownership in your model?" Steve, yeah, you still have profit in your model? And he got really tired of it, and he just stopped responding to me after a while.
Okay.
And then one day I said it to him, and he goes, "No, I changed it to a thermodynamic model."
Okay, interesting.
So when you start to doubt if I know things, remember that story.
Well, on that good note, I'm going to have to say goodbye. Great to meet you both. We'll be
I
in
think
touch.
after this, I'm not staying too.
That was really terrible of me, but it's a true story, though. It's a
No,
true
no,
story.
It's good. It's good.
Well, we're so happy to meet you, Dominic, and thank you for
We'll
this.
be in touch. Thanks
Yeah,
so
me
much,
too.
guys.
Yeah.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm glad you both didn't run away as we reached the time. That was great.
Yeah, full support.
So Elif, don't hate me because of that little arrogant story, but
No,
it's a
no,
true
I'm not.
story. It's a true story.
I think what I had with you, like the energetic in an energetic level, like I appreciate, which that's why I'm working on this podcast project right now. I appreciate for the effort, no matter what. I love people who are just like kind of crazy about, you know, getting in depth to the topic, and like kind of this is for me expression of divine energy when you are that passionate about the topic, and when you really like not just talk about them, like come up with the ideas. I appreciate this a lot. So that's why like I have seen your energy, I have seen your motivation, and that's why I was like, hey, let's get one more time. So maybe that there will be more people, because I understand that you accept feedback also. It's not like you are like, hey, I had to like, you know, this kind of people. It's that's we need more of those people to develop these ideas. So that's very important, and I appreciate this. And I also love to learn more about the topic. So that was an opportunity for me to hear one more time what you have shared last time and to internalize it more.
Yeah, well, I need to. I'm thinking that I need to try to get more organized and really hone this down a little bit over the next few days and try to present it one more time in a more coherent way. Not for you, but for other people that haven't heard it yet. Because tonight did not go the way I wanted it to. It wasn't nearly as coherent as I wanted. And that's my fault. I'm a teacher. I should know better. I should know better.
Yeah, but
I should have been better prepared.
This
Oh, well.
is a topic that like there are a lot of information that needs to be passed to for people to wholly see what you're talking about, and we might need to have a background as well. And of course, nowadays, like we are kind of like in this transformation of receiving information through the virtual content. So having a presentation will be lovely for you to also manage it easily. And maybe one more feedback I could give, like that's wonderfully accept feedback, but maybe you divide the time that you receive the feedback. Like maybe you will have like a separate time for feedbacks. Not every like I understand you are open to develop your ideas, your wording, etc. And it's wonderful people are participating, but it may be challenging you to manage it. So you can still have feedback, but maybe in the separate time.
Well, tonight I wasn't expecting to go off on that thing about, no, that's just, you know, there are people who simply believe that ancient cultures weren't what they are, because most of the scholarship in the past on ancient cultures, Aboriginal intact cultures, has been that they're
Can you
violent
stop
and
recording?
nasty. Oh yeah, should have done that a long time ago after some of the
Yeah,
stuff
I think
said.
so. I think we should cut this.
Where's the recording button?
And down in the middle, I guess.
I don't even see. Maybe it stopped already. Oh, there it is. Hold on.
Yeah.